Okay guys, so today we're going to look at doing some removing and replacing the vehicle panels. Some really basic stuff, common stuff that we do quite a lot in body shops. So we're going to remove the bonnet, front bumper, a wing, we're going to take a door off whilst we're here and then obviously replace them afterwards. What I like to do, or what's a good idea to do, is plan. Have a good look at your vehicle, make sure you understand where all the components are, where they fit, how they're fastened together. So this is the plan that we're going to follow. We're going to remove the front bumper cover, near side front wing, that's in the UK the passenger side, the side nearest the curb, near side front door and the bonnet, and any other bits and pieces that we might need to remove whilst we're doing that. So I guess the first thing to do is inspect the vehicle, look and see how things are held on, get a good feel and idea how this car's constructed and what kind of work we're up against, and then we can make sure we select the right tool. So I guess the first job is, let's reach in, undo the bonnet or release the bonnet catch, and let's have a look under there. A little tip for you, if you're working on a customer's car, I always used to drop the window down that way if there's any issues with an alarm or any electrics and the car locks itself for whatever reason, you've still got access to the car. Plus it makes things a little bit easier, like reaching in for the bonnet release catch. Nice and steady. Let's have a quick look here, find out where the bonnet prop goes. So if we look, we've got a few clips holding bits in place, 10mm nuts in there, or bolts rather. The bonnet, they look like 13s, but typically with the Japanese cars they use a 12 or a 14. I'd say they're a 12. We can't really see what's holding the wing on. We've got a wheel arch liner in the way, that's something we'll have to remove. And let's have a quick look at the door. Typically in the door we have a check strap, some hinges and maybe a wiring harness. And whilst I think on before I remove this door, I'll get some lights set up so it'll be a little bit easier to see what we're doing. So, quick plan then. To remove the bumper, I would imagine we need to get behind the wing. They're typically held on an edge like this. They're also usually held on the top. I would imagine there's something maybe behind there. Same at the other side, holding it in place. And you quite typically, underneath, we get some bolts. Actually, they look like those go into a trim. There we are, actually into the cross member. They're 10mm again. So again, on most cars, obviously there's variations, but you're going to be held at the top somewhere, underneath and either side. So to get to that bumper, I think we're going to need to remove and replace the wheel arch liner. So taking a look at that, I would imagine to remove that wing we're going to need to take off or remove and replace the near side headlamp. And obviously we're already removing the bumper cover, so that should give us good access. And the bonnet itself, that looks fairly simple and straightforward. 12mm that side, 12mm that side. It would be nice to have an assistant when taking a bonnet off, but I'll show you a little way around that. It's not my preferred method, but there are always ways and means of doing these jobs. Whilst we're here, might as well have a look at some of the equipment I've already got together. Cheated a little bit there, I've already had a quick look around, so I've got an idea what to expect. And one of the most important bits of kit that we use is going to be a socket set. Now you'll notice I've written down 1/2 inch, 3/8 inch and 1/4 inch. And just because not everybody is aware, not everybody knows, that refers to this business end here where the sockets actually attach. Okay, so that bit where we attach a socket or an extension is typically, I'll get you a rule, I don't know how well you can see through here, typically that will be 1/4 inch in width. Makes sense. So you'll not be surprised, a 3/8 socket set, that's going to be 3/8 inch. And surprise surprise, 1/2 inch socket set, that business end there, if we quickly measure, that's going to be 1/2 inch. As intriguing as that is, there's another reason for this, or another guide, a rule of thumb we work with. You'll notice this is quite a small, almost a dainty little set. The 3/8 is a little bit more robust, a little bit stronger. and the 1/2 inch is quite substantial. So as a rule of thumb, I tend to use a 1/4 drive socket set for most panel work. If I'm removing and replacing trims and panel, for me a 1/4 drive socket set seems to work quite nicely. I know a lot of technicians that would use a 3/8 as their preferred piece of equipment. Hardly anybody, unless you really have to, would use a 1/2 inch set to remove a 10mm bolt, and hopefully that's quite obvious. You just look at the physical size and difference. You can get a lot more leverage, therefore a lot more turning force, through a 1/2 inch socket and ratchet than you can a 1/4 drive. So if you were to tighten a 10mm bolt with that, I'd expect it to snap, or it'd be fairly easy with minimum effort to snap that. Hence why a lot of people use a 3/8. There's less turning force than the 1/2 inch. It's a nice compromise, it's a good size, and you can typically range from 10mm. I'd probably use this up to 17. I probably wouldn't bother with those bigger sockets. So why do I use a 1/4 inch? I'm a snapper. As an apprentice, I used to snap a lot of bolts, and it just kind of stuck with me. I just find this socket size up to typically 13, sometimes 14mm suits my slight heavy-handedness. Okay, so onto some of the other tools. We've got combination spanners, side cutters. We're not looking to cut any wires, but I'll show you a little trick with that later. Good for removing clips, a couple of assorted screwdrivers, a little pick, a trim tool for removing clips, and a little modified screwdriver that I just modified a few years ago. It's got an interesting shape that just lends itself nicely. Pliers, because you never know, some vice grips, you never know, and a lighter, which might seem odd, but I'll explain that in a little while, and obviously some PPE, a little bit of tape and some welding gauntlets. Okay, so if we're ready, we'll pause for a second, get set up, and we'll make a start. Right, so our first job is going to be removing this front bumper cover. We know we need to get the wheel arch liners out. We've already had a look at that. We know those trims need to come off of there. We know there's some fasteners underneath holding it in place. We're expecting some behind that wing where we said the bumpers are held at the corner. So let's make a start. Let's little pick tool. Let's have a look at some of these clips that we have holding things in place. Should be fairly simple and straightforward. Now if we look closely at this one, we can see like a little line, so that suggests that the centre lifts out. Now a lot of people just flick at the edge. That can cause the clip to break. I like to get right into the middle and lift that gently. Now at this point, a trim tool, really nice, just to nip in there and finish that off. I did say side cutters, there was a little technique that I had, or a little use for them. I tend to find some of these clips are quite weak and brittle at times, or sometimes the opposite, the plastic's really soft, so as you lift with a trim fork, it just bends the ends over. Now if you can grip the clip really gently, we don't have to snip that off, grip it nicely and lever that way, we actually get a really good firm purchase of that, and it stops those edges lifting up. Not very often need it, but it's a nice little technique to use if you do. I'll just rattle on and get these clips out. When we're levering, be careful not to damage any paintwork. Again, someday this is going to be somebody's car that they really care about, not just a demonstration vehicle, so get used to looking after things. I'll just quickly tweak these clips out. Should be a similar sort of setup. And there we go. Then with a trim fork, and off we pop. And nip over to this side. Same sort of thing again. This one looks quite loose already, to be fair. Yeah, I think this car's been worked on more than once. Now you'll notice I'm just putting the clips and the fasteners on this table. I like to have somewhere to put all the nuts, bolts, clips and trims that I remove. Because I'm doing this in one session, if you like, just to remove and replace, they'll be fine there. If it was a car that I was working on, waiting for a new bumper to be painted, new parts to be ordered, etc, etc, I'd absolutely have all the bolts, clips and trims in a pot, some sort of container, an old-fashioned lin bin, paint mixing cup, whatever's available to hand, and I tend to group them. rather than putting every single nut and bolt you take off a car into one pot and then hoping for the best when you come to rebuild. It's always a good idea to keep them together. So front end bumper parts in one pot, wing bolts in another, headlamp bolts another, etc, etc. Just nice to get these little habits going as you're learning your way to do a job. Right, so let's have a look at this grill. Rule of thumb, if it won't come out, don't start ripping and ragging things to pieces. There's usually a reason. So if I gently tease this back, there we are, that's nicely slowly coming out. Yeah, and down there I can see some little tabs, some little trims, if you like, that are just holding that in. And if that's resisting, I'll try and show you this. If you get your finger underneath, you can usually, yeah, just unclip it. Hopefully you can see that little tab was catching in those little holes. Designed to do that and stopping it from coming off or holding it in place. And again, it looks like this bulb holder is held in with a clip there. These are quite often fairly tight, they are in this situation, so an option is simply unplug the bulb holder and leave it there. Not going to lie, I'm not really a fan of that, so I'm going to persevere. Again, this little pick, careful not to stab yourself. I'll see if I can slot this little pick in there. And away we go, that's undone that quite nicely. Now, a couple of reasons for wearing latex gloves. One, to protect your hands. Two components, bulbs, even a low wattage bulb like this, don't really like having our greasy paw prints or fingerprints on them. So it's always nice to have some latex gloves on there, or some sort of PPE, for your sake and for the cars. And also, whilst we're here, if you notice we've got these three cutouts. Not sure how well you can see that, but they are a slightly different shape. So if you don't line them up properly, it simply will not fit. That's a good way of making sure you've got the right bulb holder in the right location. If we had 2 or 3 of these in a cluster of lights, they would probably have a slightly different pattern, so you could only put the correct bulb in the correct gap. Okay. Okay, same with the other side. Let's see how well this frees itself. Again, don't rive and rag, let's tease and gently apply pressure. We can hear that clicking. I might need to, yeah, let's get my fingers down in there and help these along. Again, not sure how well you can see that. That one down there is holding a little bit. And there we go. And same again. I learned this time. Oh, actually, I got that. I was going to say I learned this time and brought my little pick tool, but that one unclipped a little bit easier, which is quite nice. Okay, so that's the grills out the way. Now let's have a look and see what's holding the bumper from the top. Well, we can see those clips that held the grills in place went through those little brackets. We have a bolt there that looks like it comes through the headlamp. And one missing. Typically cars that have been worked on before, sometimes will have bits and pieces missing. I always like to, where possible, replace them, so we'll find a suitable nut and bolt for that when we come to rebuild it. Let's have a look underneath then. We saw that there was a 10mm bolt, so we're going to use the ratchet. You'll notice I'm putting an extension on. A couple of reasons for that. One, it's comfort and clearance. You know, if you've got something sticking out and you've not got an extension, you're going to catch your knuckles. This job can be uncomfortable enough without helping matters. And two, is to protect the car. If we were removing a bolt from this wing without using an extension, we'd be clashing and bashing and cracking away on that paintwork, where an extension just gives you that bit of clearance. Again, protects the part, protects your hands. It's a win-win really. And another little point about ratchets, I hear people saying righty-tighty, lefty-loosey to remember which way around a bolt goes on and off. Well, righty-tighty is okay if your ratchet's this way, but if you're this way, righty-tighty will be undoing. I just tend to think of clockwise, so time marching onwards, and anti-clockwise going backwards. So clockwise is on, anti-clockwise is backwards or off. So I'll already set my ratchet up to anti-clockwise, It's fine when the ratchet's in front of you, but if you're behind something, it's reversed. If you're upside down, you know, it can get quite complicated. So before I use a ratchet, I'll set it to remove or replace depending on what I'm doing. So clockwise on, anti-clockwise off, and we are anti-clockwise. I'll just peek under here, and there we are. Hopefully you can see that. That was nice and simple. And again. That was nice and simple to retrieve those. And if we have a gentle grab and tug on there, we can see that that's free. So in theory we should just be held either side. Again, I'll keep these nice and to hand. With a sneaky feeling I'm going to need this, maybe a trim tool. So if we look around here, we're going to have some clips holding this in place. Actually, on this particular car, again, it's a demonstration vehicle, these clips have been left out. Much the same as the clips holding the grills in on the bumper. We'd have some clips around there, and then typically some screws. Let's have a quick look. Yep, one underneath, holding the wheel arch liner like there. So, little tip, always apply good positive pressure. Screwdrivers want to lift. They've got a point on there that acts like a cam. So as we turn, if we're not pushing, it tends to want to lift itself out. And screws that are typically mounted underneath or at the bottom of a car are prone to corrosion and stick. So, good positive force, you can see that that's pushing in, and then anti-clockwise, away we go. And that's dead easy. Another little tip, whilst we're here. If you've got good positive pressure and you start to undo anti-clockwise and it won't move, chances are it's seized. I was taught that if you push really hard and go clockwise, so tighten it just a fraction, for whatever reason, I'm sure some scientists could tell us, that's easier to do and it cracks any corrosion behind there and it makes backing it off easier. Not always needed, but it's nice to be aware of that little technique. But always maintain positive pressure. If you're using this screwdriver, you want to make sure you're pushing in so it can't slip before you turn. Okay, and there was that one underneath. This screwdriver may be a little bit too long. Let's have a look. We're just on, and yeah, I think we're going to get away with that. Excellent. Obviously, if it wouldn't, we'd just go get a shorter screwdriver. But make sure it's the right head. I think this is a Posi-Drive 2. If it was a smaller one like this, it'd have a tendency to move quite a bit, have a bit of slack, and that again would cause it to round off or slip. Things we'd like to avoid. Okay. Well, there's actually not a single clip as far as I can see. Well, there should be, but again, as is the way when other people have been in there sometimes. I'm not going to complain, that's actually made life a little bit easier for me today. Gently lift this out, we don't want to catch any of these edges. Although it's only a plastic trim, it's still fairly easy to scratch paintwork. And we'll pop this out of the way in the corner, nice and safe. Once we're thinking about popping things around, I'm just going to lay out a couple of pads, these little kneeling mats. I'm just guesstimating where I need them. And when I come to take the bumper off, I've got somewhere soft and non-scratchy, for want of a better term, so we don't damage that bumper at all. Again, I'm expecting a 10mm. I'm going to get my hand up behind there and have a feel around, and yep, they feel like 10mm. My finger's there now, inside. That feels like a clip rather than a bolt. There's one bolt. There's another bolt. So we've got an idea where they are. Again, quick check. We're on anti-clockwise, so we're going to undo. And although you can get your head in there and have a look. Something that we tend to do quite a bit is work behind panels, so you learn to get a feel for where things are, what you're actually working on and dealing with. So you learn to identify a 10mm from a 13mm and an 8mm, etc., just by feel. There we go, that's come out quite nicely. Often these are quite rusty. There we go, and again, that tapping something up there, not the edge of the wing. Brilliant. So that's that undone, and right, what I'll do is I'll nip to the other side now, do the same, and then we should be ready to lift off. Okay, so we're back on this side. The bolts have been taken out after the wheel arch liner from this side has been removed, and if we remember, there was a fastening missing from the near side, but we had one this side. I've got a 13 socket, and that feels there's too much movement there. If you remember what I said, Japanese manufacturers like to use 12s or 14s. So check, and if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. And that's coming out quite nicely. Now, I've taken everything off. This is probably the last bolt or nut holding this bumper on. Another little trick, grab your screwdriver, drop it through one of these holes, make sure it doesn't damage the radiator, and when we take this nut and bolt off, the bumper's still going to be held in place, albeit by a little screwdriver that we can pull out, but it's not going to flop to the floor. That's the point that we're making. We want to make sure that that bumper doesn't just tumble to the floor and cause any damage. Even if we were replacing it with a new one, it's just good practice to think about things before you start working and take care not to damage anything. Okay, so with that in mind, a little mat there just to help. Now again, this would be really nice if I had a colleague at one side, me at the other, but today there's just myself. I did say we can adapt and overcome quite a lot and find ways around, so I'm going to gently unhinge from that side, gently unhinge from this side. Got a little retaining clip in there, didn't have on the other side, that's good. So again, this is why I like to have things to hand. That's safe and secure. It's going to give me time to delve into what the issue is here. There we go. There's a nice little clip just in there. There we go, that's undone nicely. You see, had we had our roll cab, our toolbox miles away and no equipment, would have been struggling then, but because we've planned ahead and things are to hand, that's actually worked out quite nicely. So again, gently lift things away, and again, we can see this won't remove because we've got some wiring attached. So, hand in there, lift that clip off. I'm holding the bumper, I've got my knee under the bumper so nothing's swinging off the wires, and there we are, that's off nice and safe and easy. I've already got some mats here, I don't know if they're the right distance. Yep. And yeah, so that bumper's off nice and safe.